Hey guys, tonight we're slipping under the faded quilt of American history to discover something truly jaw-dropping. The horrifying reality of heroin-laced baby teething syrup in 1900s of America. That's right, before bedtime routines included Paw Patrol and gentle lullabies, parents in the good old US of A were reaching for a miracle cure that contained actual heroin. Imagine soothing your fussy infant with the same stuff that would later become the plot of about 50 HBO documentaries. So before you do anything, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and comment. But only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Seriously, don't feel pressured. Peer pressure is how we got into this mess in the first place. Now, dim those lights, turn on a fan for that soft white noise, and get cozy. Maybe wrap yourself in a blanket that definitely isn't filled with sawdust or asbestos. Because tonight, you're about to learn how America's brightest medical minds once decided that narcotics were the answer to all of life's problems, including teething pain. But let's pause. Have you ever wondered what it was like to be a parent in 1900? What desperate sleep-deprived logic led someone to put heroin in a bottle labeled "for infants"? What did the average American think was in their medicine? Did anyone read the label? Did anyone even have glasses strong enough to read the label? Was the syrup actually effective? Or did it just ensure you'd finally get some sleep, one way or another? How did an entire nation decide, hey, let's give baby little Johnny the same thing we now keep behind 10 layers of pharmacy counter and a judge's approval? And would you survive a week in a world where everything from cough drops to your breakfast cereal could, at any moment, go full Breaking Bad? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up at 1902. You are the proud parent of a teething baby. A medicine cabinet full of substances now, classified as Schedule 1, and a complete lack of consumer protection laws. Good luck. You stand in your dim kitchen, clutching a glass bottle with a label promising peaceful slumber for infants. It glows with the aura of modern science, or at least the confidence of a man with a moustache and a top hat. The syrup inside is thick, sweet, and, unbeknownst to you, about 1/6 heroin by weight. But hey, the ad said it works miracles, so bottoms up, baby. Let's set the scene. It's 1902. And the house is quiet except for the shrill, soul-piercing wail of your teething infant, echoing off the flowered wallpaper and bouncing through your last nerve. The gas lamp flickers, illuminating the parade of half-empty bottles on the sideboard. Dr. Fizzle's invigorating tonic, Mrs. Satterwhite's calming elixir, and tonight's star, heroin compound for the growing child. You reach for the thick glass, noticing the label features a plump, blissfully unconscious baby surrounded by clouds and daisies. Never mind the tiny print. Your eyes haven't recovered from squinting at the Sears catalog. You pop the cork. Instantly, the kitchen fills with a heady perfume of sugar, cherry, and a faint medicinal tang that hints, if you're paying attention, to stronger things lurking underneath. The syrup pours like honey, sticking to the spoon and your fingers. The instructions say a half teaspoon for relief. But this isn't your first rodeo. The baby is shrieking, your nerves are shot, and somewhere a neighbor's rooster is considering joining in. Maybe just a splash more, for good measure. Parenting, after all, is about intuition. You glance at the clock. 2:19 a.m. The rest of the house is dark. Your spouse is snoring, unaware of your alchemical midnight ritual. You cradle your little bundle, who just an hour ago was a cherub, and now more closely resembles a furious woodland sprite. In goes the syrup. The baby pauses, considers, then glares at you with watery eyes. Seconds pass. You hold your breath. And then silence. The bottle was right. It is a miracle. Your baby, seconds ago a red-faced banshee, slumps gently into sleep. You're filled with relief and a creeping sense of awe at modern science. You put the bottle back on the shelf, right next to the cough drops that are 80% cocaine and the soothing rub that could double as paint thinner. If nothing else, your medicine cabinet is ready for any scenario, from teething to minor existential crisis. You return to bed. The silence is suspicious. You check the crib 5 times, just to be sure. The baby is sleeping so soundly you wonder if you accidentally cured all future tantrums in one dose. The house, usually alive with the sounds of life, coughing, groaning floorboards, distant cat brawls, is now tranquil, if slightly ominous. You feel proud, resourceful, and, let's be honest, a tiny bit guilty. In the morning, the world is new. Your child wakes, groggy but smiling, with a serene expression usually reserved for monks or people who've just won the lottery. You pour your coffee black because milk is reserved for the babies, and nobody trusts the delivery boy's hands. As you sip, you consider the bottle again. Is this safe? The ad said, endorsed by doctors. But you're starting to wonder if those doctors got their degrees out of a cereal box. Still, in 1902, there is no FDA, no tamper-evident seal, and certainly no warning labels about side effects, addiction, or the possibility that your infant might soon develop a suspicious taste for jazz. The concept of side effects is as foreign as yoga pants. If the baby is quiet, the medicine works. That's the logic. You tell yourself you're doing your best, because you are. Everyone is. The neighbor down the road swears by electric baths for cranky toddlers. The woman at the grocer recommends whiskey-soaked rags. In a world where the answer to most parenting problems is put something on the gums and pray, heroin-laced syrup feels like a godsend, if a slightly haunted one, and so, bottle after bottle, night after night, a generation of American babies naps deeply, while their parents wonder if maybe, just maybe, there's such a thing as too much peace and quiet. But hey, at least nobody's teething anymore. Let's talk about ingredients. The 1900 patent medicine shelf is less a pharmacy and more a chemistry teacher's fever dream. Alcohol, chloroform, morphine, and of course heroin, each ingredient with a side effect ranging from might make the baby sleepy to may erase your entire sense of time. You stand in front of your medicine cabinet and it looks less like a collection of health aids and more like you're about to start a science fair project you never agreed to. Glass bottles of amber and green, corks bulging slightly from the pressure of whatever's bubbling inside, labels hand-lettered in fonts so ornate, you wonder if you need a monocle to decipher them. There's a certain optimism to it all, a hope that somewhere in these potions is the secret to a quiet night, or at least a few minutes of silence so you can contemplate your life choices. Let's start with alcohol. It's the all-purpose elixir of the era, splashed liberally into cough syrups, tonics, and even children's nerve drops. The label says trace amounts, but the reality is that if you spilled a bottle on the kitchen floor, your dog would sleep for a week. The manufacturers didn't skimp. Alcohol numbs the gums, the mind, and, if you're not careful, your ability to operate a horse-drawn carriage. But compared to the rest of the lineup, alcohol is practically a health food. Next up, morphine, the Victorian answer to everything from toothaches to nervous conditions. The bottle might say soothing, but the real effect is more like a one-way ticket to the land of nodding off and forgetting your own name. Morphine pops up everywhere, soothing syrups, teething powders, even relaxing lozenges for children. You know it's the early 1900s because the only warning label says, "Do not exceed recommended dose unless you enjoy unpredictable adventures." Let's not overlook chloroform, the secret sauce in many quick relief tinctures. At the time, Chloroform was considered a modern marvel, a fast, effective anesthetic. Also, the active ingredient in many murder mystery plots. If you're using it on your child's sore gums, you're technically participating in a chemical experiment that, today, would get you a very stern call from several government agencies. But back then, it was just another day in the medicine cabinet. Rub it on the gums. If the baby stops fussing and starts floating, you're doing it right. And then, of course, there's heroin, the star of the show. Advertised as non-habit forming and gentler than morphine. It's like Pepsi. If Pepsi was designed by Dr. Frankenstein. When German pharmaceutical companies invented it, they actually named it after the German word for heroic. The logic went something like, if morphine is strong and heroin is stronger, then your baby will sleep heroically. Or something like that. You wonder how many parents, desperate and bleary-eyed, read the label and thought, sounds legit. But wait, there's more. There are calming bromides, which are basically sedatives with a side order of mystery. Strychnine, because nothing says invigorating tonic like a hint of poison. And good old-fashioned cocaine, sprinkled in toothache drops and invigorating wine. The only thing missing is a skull and crossbones. And frankly, that was probably on the next design iteration. There is no such thing as an ingredient list, just vague promises and the occasional warning from a cranky neighbor who claims his uncle grew a third ear from using the wrong syrup. The taste, sweet, usually, thanks to a mountain of sugar or honey, meant to cover up the chemical burn and convince your child that medicine time is fun time. The aftertaste, however, is a mix of licorice, desperation, and the creeping suspicion that you've just altered your child's DNA. Today, medicine comes with a folded sheet listing every possible risk from hives to time travel. But in 1902, your main resource is blind trust and the hope that whatever you're giving your baby will keep everyone alive until sunrise. The real magic isn't in the bottle. It's in the parents, heroically guessing their way through the chemistry set, one questionable drop at a time. And if your child's fever breaks and nobody develops glowing eyes, that's just another win for science. No pediatrician, no problem. Your local doctor might also shoe horses or sell you a tonic for your rheumatism. He assures you that the heroin syrup is safe and effective, mostly because the alternative is listening to your baby scream until you go mad or move to Nebraska. Welcome to the medical landscape of 1902, where a diploma on the wall is optional. Bedside manner involves a lot of hat-tipping, and the best credential is usually the volume of your mustache. Medicine is less a science and more of a confident performance. You enter the doctor's office, which is also the hardware store, the post office, and, on Sundays, the town's only library. The shelves are lined with dusty bottles, jars of suspicious powders, and a skeleton in the corner for educational purposes, or maybe just for vibes. You present your fussy, red-faced baby and explain the issue. Teething, sleeplessness, possibly some existential dread. The doctor listens, nods sagely, and says, "Ah, yes, classic infant malaise." He consults a dog-eared medical guide last updated around the time of the Spanish-American War, then reaches for a bottle labeled "Guaranteed Slumber." There's no mention of side effects, only bold claims about how fast it works. He winks and says, "Half a spoonful, and you'll both sleep like logs." You don't ask questions. You're too tired to ask questions. Medical advice in this era is as consistent as the weather. The experts range from the town's barber surgeon, who will gladly pull a tooth, lance a boil, and give you a fresh haircut, all with the same set of tools, to the local apothecary, whose training consists of memorizing the periodic table and not fainting at the sight of blood. If it's good enough for Queen Victoria's grandchildren, "It's good enough for yours," says the doctor, who may or may not have heard that through the telegraph grapevine. There's a certain Wild West logic to the whole thing. Everyone has a remedy, and none of them match. One neighbor swears by goose grease on the gums, another recommends wrapping the baby in cabbage leaves, and the local pastor is convinced it's a spiritual matter best solved by prayer. And failing that, more syrup. If one concoction doesn't work, you simply try the next. Trial and error, with a strong emphasis on error. Let's not forget the booming business of traveling medicine men. Once a month, a horse-drawn wagon rattles into town, painted with promises of instant relief and nature's best science. A man in a dazzling suit jumps out and dazzles the crowd with a few card tricks, then launches into a sales pitch, so enthusiastic you wonder if he's been sampling his own inventory. He pulls out a bottle of Dr. Jolly's soothing nectar for the young and frail, assures you it's endorsed by 7 out of 10 Harvard men, not doctors, just men, and by the time you get home, you realize you've bought 3 bottles and a patent egg beater you didn't need. Desperation and trust make a potent cocktail. If your baby's not sleeping, it feels like the universe is punishing you for crimes you can't remember. The doctor, sensing this, is quick to reassure. This stuff is modern science. It's what all the best families are using. If you ask, is it habit forming? You'll get a confident, absolutely not, as he scribbles something in a ledger. The modern equivalent would be Googling, "Is this safe?" at 3 a.m. and choosing the first answer that says what you want to hear. Behind the bravado, though, is a shared understanding. Everyone's doing their best with what little they know. The science is evolving, the bottles keep arriving, and the doctor's only real prescription is hope, served with a side of denial and a shot of whatever's in the brown bottle that week. So you take the advice, try the syrup, and cross your fingers. If it works, the doctor's a genius. If it doesn't, you start eyeing Nebraska. Before influencers, there were syrup ads in the Sunday paper, cherubic babies, blissful mothers, and bold promises like soothes even the fiercest little lion. You wonder if fiercest refers to teething or withdrawal symptoms. It's Sunday morning. You shuffle into the kitchen in your robe, pour yourself a cup of weak, pre-electric coffee maker coffee, and open the newspaper. Ready to be bombarded by advertisements so optimistic, they make modern Instagram influencers look like nihilists. There on page 3, nestled between the latest news about horseless carriages and a recipe for gelatinized ham, you spot it, a full-page ad for Mother's Joy syrup. A plump, rosy-cheeked baby sleeps peacefully in a cradle, a gentle hand resting nearby. Presumably the mother, though she looks suspiciously well rested for someone with an infant in 1902. You read the copy, guaranteed to relieve teething pains, colic, fretfulness, and all manner of baby discomfort. Restores harmony to the home. Trusted by doctors and mothers across the nation. At the bottom, in curly gold letters, a line that could have been written by P.T. Barnum himself, contains only the purest natural ingredients. No mention of heroin, of course, unless you count nature's finest poppy essence. Every ad is a work of art, pastel colors, hand-drawn cherubs, testimonials from Mrs. B. of Ohio. Little Clarence finally sleeps, and an array of medical endorsements, most of which are from leading experts, all of whom seem to have been drawn by the same artist. Doctor could mean anyone from a retired Civil War field surgeon to a man who once saw a skeleton at the World's Fair. There's an absurd earnestness to the language. Recommended by 5 out of 5 satisfied mothers, proclaims one ad, which seems suspiciously high in an era before phone surveys. Ensures gentle rest for both child and parent. Not a word about the post-nap confusion or why, exactly. Your baby can now sleep through a brass band parade and the annual 4th of July cannon firing. The ad men know their audience. They promise everything you want. A peaceful baby, a calm household, and a return to sanity for the entire neighborhood. If you could bottle hope, sprinkle in a little denial, and wrap it in floral script, you'd have these advertisements. The illustrations make motherhood look so effortless: crisp aprons, clean homes, hair that refuses to move even in a tornado. The only chaos is a single overturned toy, artfully placed near the cradle, as if to remind you that a real mother's only problem is the occasional rattle on the floor. In reality, you're reading this while dodging spit-up, negotiating toddler hostage situations, and wondering when you last experienced REM sleep. The ads don't care. They insist that one spoonful of syrup is all it takes to turn your household into a Norman Rockwell painting. Long before Norman Rockwell picked up a brush. There's also a delightful lack of subtlety about the product's magic. One ad features a testimonial from a mother who claims, "My darling Ethel's teeth simply melted in, with no fuss at all," as if the syrup not only soothes pain but also rewrites dental biology. You flip to the next page, and there's another ad for a different syrup, this one with a side-by-side comparison. This is your baby on other syrups. This is your baby on our syrup. Peaceful, plump, and unlikely to develop a criminal record. You begin to suspect the ad men might be sampling their own wares. The real masterpiece, though, is how these ads are everywhere. In women's magazines, on handbills, tucked into flour sacks, painted on the side of barn walls, and slipped into your mailbox, along with the latest seed catalogue. The message is clear. If your baby isn't quiet, it's because you're not using the right syrup. Of course, when everyone in town is dosing their children with miracle elixir, the local playground is as tranquil as a yoga retreat, except the only mantra is, "Please, just let me sleep." And when the syrup runs out? Well, that's a problem for next Sunday's paper to solve. Advertising gold, indeed. If only peace and quiet still came with a money-back guarantee. It's hour 3 of a midnight baby meltdown. You're out of ideas, out of hope, and out of earplugs. The syrup bottle is calling your name, promising a night of uninterrupted, guilt-free sleep. You hesitate, then realize your other option is screaming into the void. Let's set the mood. The house is dark, but not quiet. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside, and every mysterious clatter in the pantry feels amplified by your baby's endless shrieks. You try every trick in the book. Rocking, your arms are noodles. Walking, you've worn a path in the linoleum. Singing, you cycled through lullabies, folk songs, and, in desperation, some polka you half remember from childhood. Nothing works. Your baby is in the grip of the teething demon, a tiny, red-faced tyrant determined to break your spirit and maybe your lease. You check the clock. It's 2:47 a.m. In a world without all-night drive-through pharmacies, there's no cavalry coming. Your partner is asleep, or, more likely, pretending to be asleep with the dedication of an Oscar-winning actor. It's just you, the baby, and the bottle on the kitchen shelf. The label glimmers in the moonlight, promising restful nights and happy mornings. You imagine a land where people sleep in shifts longer than 20 minutes. Could such a place exist? Maybe in Switzerland. You run through your mental checklist. Tried the cold washcloth on the gums. Baby threw it on the cat. Rubber teething ring. Now somewhere under the stove. Never to be seen again. Warm bath. Ended with you both wetter and angrier. You even attempted a gentle stroll outside, but nearly froze solid on the porch, and the neighbor's dog howled in sympathetic misery. It's then that you truly understand what patent medicine really means. a solution for people who have run out of ideas and are rapidly running out of sanity. In 1902, this is modern science. The bottle has a doctor's signature. It's probably fake. A gold seal. Definitely fake. And a list of satisfied customers who all look suspiciously like the artist's own children, drawn in 3 different hats. Still, the testimonials are seductive. Little Henry slept from dusk to dawn. My Mildred hasn't fussed since Easter. Cured my husband's gout. It's practically begging to be trusted. You hesitate. The bottle is heavy in your hand. Maybe you remember hearing a cautionary tale from your cousin in the city, her friend's baby. Too much syrup, slept so long they started to worry. But here's the thing about sleep deprivation. It's the world's oldest mind. Altering substance. Your standards change. Your logic unravels. You start to believe that if Thomas Edison could invent the light bulb on 2 hours of sleep, surely you can trust a little bottle of science. You measure the dose. Hands trembling. The baby wails on. In this moment, you realize just how far parents will go when pushed to the brink. There's no book or lecture that prepares you for the psychological warfare of the sleepless night. You start to fantasize about elaborate solutions. Hiring a night nurse, inventing time travel, moving into the barn until the teething years are over. None of these are realistic, but right now, neither is making it to dawn with your sanity intact. Finally, you give in. The syrup slides down, and almost instantly, the baby's shrieks fade. The silence is shocking, a miracle, a little unnerving, and entirely welcome. You return to bed, heart pounding, mind racing. Will it work? Did you do the right thing? Should you have waited another hour? These are tomorrow's worries. Tonight, you're just grateful for the peace. And as you drift off to sleep, one thought hovers at the edge of your dreams. Sometimes, the history of modern science is really just a long, desperate love letter from one exhausted parent to another. Your kitchen is full of unlabeled bottles, mysterious powders, and sharp objects at toddler level. Everything is flammable, nothing is regulated, and safety caps are still 50 years away. The only childproof thing in the house is your will to live. Let's step into the average American home in 1902. A place where every day is a new opportunity to defy the odds of childhood survival. You walk into the kitchen and immediately notice that the shelves are a wild mix of hope and hazard. Bottles of every color line, the counters, most without labels. If there's a system, it's one only you understand. The blue bottle is for coughs, the brown one is for spirits, and the one with the cork stuck sideways is for emergencies, though no one quite remembers what kind. There is a lingering chemical sweetness in the air, occasionally interrupted by the sharp bite of camphor, turpentine, or whatever Grandpa claims puts hair on your chest. If you're lucky, you have a cabinet to store the most dangerous things. If you're like most families, everything just goes wherever it fits. Baking soda sits next to rat poison. Matches share a drawer with wooden spoons and, because you're feeling fancy, the family's only thermometer. On the floor, a stray sewing needle winks up from the cracks, perfectly placed for bare feet or curious baby hands. The mop leans against the stove, a silent bystander to every culinary experiment gone wrong. Toddlers roam freely, their tiny hands brushing across open flames, mysterious tins, and that one jar of medicine with the skull and crossbones drawn on by your older child as a joke. Baby gates don't exist. Instead, you've invented the furniture obstacle course, a fortress of chairs, trunks, and whatever else you can stack in front of anything remotely dangerous. Spoiler alert, no fortress can stop a motivated toddler. It's just cardio for the grown-ups. Above the sink, the window is always cracked, partly for air, partly to let out the ever-present cloud of smoke from the stove, the pipe, or the occasional fire when someone forgets the goose fat on the hob. Outside, the yard is a minefield of rusty nails, discarded glass, and whatever the neighbor's horse left behind. Playgrounds? Not invented yet. Instead, you have the back 40, an all-natural obstacle course of splinters, sharp rocks, and sticks that double as swords, fishing poles, and sometimes makeshift crutches. Safety as a concept is more of a family rumor than a practice. Knives hang from hooks well within reach. Scissors live in the sugar canister, and the baby spoon is just the least rusty piece of cutlery you could find this week. If you need to boil water for formula, you do it on a wood stove that could double as a medieval torture device. Every pot handle is a lesson in physics, and every spill is a chance to practice your emergency first aid skills, which mostly consist of tie something tight and hope for the best. Modern parents worry about choking hazards the size of a grape. In 1902, you hand your teething baby an actual bread crust the size of a brick and tell them to gnaw away. "It'll toughen the gums," says Grandma, who once survived scarlet fever by chewing on a raw turnip for 3 days. Then there are the medicines. Oh, the medicines. Each bottle looks deceptively innocent, but any given sip might contain enough opiates to tranquilize a small horse. Nobody counts doses. If the baby stops crying, you assume you did it right. If the baby starts glowing, well, you make a note for next time. There are no plug covers, no corner guards, no locks on the liquor cabinet because the liquor cabinet is actually just a jug under the stairs. If you want to make the house safe, your main tool is yelling, and maybe, if you're especially modern, a warning delivered with the authority of someone who has definitely not read a child psychology manual. Survival in the 1900s American home isn't about baby-proofing. It's about outwitting chaos, one day at a time. And if everyone makes it to bedtime with all 10 fingers and only minor emotional scarring, that's what you call a success. It's not just for babies. Mama gets her own bottle, this one promising relief from nerves. The main ingredient? Laudanum, a delightful mix of opium and alcohol, perfect for when your husband's mustache wax gives you a headache. Welcome to the dawn of the self-care movement, 1902 edition. You're not just caring for the kids. You're holding the entire family together with elbow grease, raw determination, and a medicine cabinet that could flatten a small village. The kids are squabbling, the stew is burning, and the laundry pile is so high you're starting to wonder if the neighbor's dog is living in there. Enter the solution to every mother's woes, conveniently packaged in an elegant glass bottle with a dainty label reading Mrs. Forthright's Nervine Elixir, soothing for ladies in distress. Laudanum isn't just any tonic. It's the panacea of the era, prescribed for everything from headaches and menstrual cramps to female hysteria, excessive thinking, and the general existential horror of living in a time before dishwashers. One sip is supposed to ease your nerves, clear your mind, and give you a sense of serene, floaty detachment from all the noise. Like yoga, if yoga came with a warning to not operate heavy machinery or attempt cross-stitching under the influence. The ritual is as familiar as it is soothing. You retire to your bedroom, the one space in the house not currently overrun by children or relatives. You uncork your little bottle, inhale the sharp, herbal aroma, and pour out a careful dose into the good china teacup. Or, if it's been an especially rough day, you skip the cup entirely. Who's judging? You sip, close your eyes, and for a few blissful moments, you are transported somewhere quieter, somewhere without laundry or turnips or the faint but persistent odor of cabbage. It's not just you. Across America, women are turning to the patent medicine shelf for comfort and calm. Magazines are filled with advertisements for calmatives, elixirs, and revivers, all of them promising to cure not only physical aches, but the unspoken strains of motherhood, marriage, and modernity. Keeps the house running and the children in line, says one glowing testimonial from a grateful mother in Street Lewis. There's no talk of side effects, unless you count the mysterious naps and a tendency to start quoting poetry at dinner. Men, of course, have their own collection of tonics, invigorating bitters, gentleman's restorative, and that old favorite, whiskey, neat. But for women, the patent medicine industry is a quiet revolution. No doctor's visit required, no awkward questions asked. The pharmacy counter becomes a confessional. The pharmacist, your silent, non-judgmental priest. You start to notice the little glass bottles everywhere, tucked in sewing baskets, perched beside the flour jar, hidden in the folds of your apron. Your friends compare brands at Quilting Bees. Mrs. Peabody's pink drops knocked me out for 2 days, boasts your neighbor. Someone else swears by valerian cordial for those nights when your husband brings home 3 surprise dinner guests and a new barbershop quartet song he's been working on. Nobody talks about what's in these remedies. Nobody really wants to. Opium and alcohol are just part of the recipe. As innocuous as sugar or cloves, at least that's what the advertisements suggest. Safe, gentle, non-habit forming, the label promises, in what must be the earliest known case of marketing-induced amnesia. In a way, these bottles are little glass lifeboats, bobbing in the sea of daily chaos. They don't solve your problems, but they make them just a little blurrier around the edges. Your nerves may not be cured, but at least you'll forget where you put them for an hour or two. By the time evening falls, the house is calm. The kids are finally asleep, thanks, perhaps, to their own miracle syrups, and you, dear mother, can sit by the window, sip your elixir, and marvel at the sheer inventiveness of human survival. Sometimes, you suspect, it takes a little help to get through another day of laundry, mustache wax, and life before Netflix. You notice your baby is, well, very relaxed, like fell asleep with both eyes open, relaxed. The pamphlet says, may cause mild drowsiness. It omits, may also cause baby to recite Edgar Allan Poe backwards. Welcome to the early days of pharmaceutical transparency, where side effects are treated as a pesky afterthought, somewhere between ignore it and don't worry. It'll probably pass. You watch your tiny bundle of joy drift off, not just to sleep, but to some astral plane between this world and the next. Limbs limp, breathing so gentle you double-check that you didn't accidentally sign your baby up for the first lunar expedition. The syrup bottle, resting innocently on the kitchen table, is all reassurance, guaranteed peaceful nights. No more fussing. Nowhere on the label does it mention possible spontaneous poetry recitation or the chance your baby will wake up with a mysterious fondness for speaking in riddles. You glance at the small print, testimonials from satisfied parents, none of whom mention what happens an hour later when their child stares at the wallpaper like it's whispering government secrets. Modern medicine comes with a scroll of warnings. Everything from may cause dizziness to call your doctor if you begin to crave sawdust. In 1902, side effects are explained away with a shrug and a cheerful, babies are mysterious. Your baby's sudden quiet could be interpreted as health, contentment, or a spiritual journey. Everyone you know has a story. Your neighbor claims her son saw angels after his first dose. Aunt Ruth swears her daughter tried to climb the curtains and sing sea shanties in Old Norse. The real fun begins when the effects go slightly off script. Your baby, formerly a non-stop source of shrieking, is now somewhere between blissed-out yogi and sleep-paralyzed Victorian ghost. You watch, hovering between pride and alarm, as your child's limbs twitch in slow motion. Maybe you're just not used to the silence. Maybe your own nerves are so frazzled that any break from reality feels like a blessing. But then the baby giggles at nothing, babbles cryptic phrases, or insists on being swaddled in the curtains. For a brief, delirious moment, you wonder if the syrup has unlocked a level of consciousness usually reserved for very advanced monks. You try to reassure yourself. The pamphlet said, natural ingredients. The pharmacist winked, which could mean safe or just good luck. There's always a little uncertainty baked into parenthood, but this feels like you've dosed your baby with a ticket to the dreamlands and hoped for the best. You check their pulse for the 5th time in 10 minutes. But it's steady, even if their eyes are now fixed on the ceiling, tracking invisible comets. Let's not forget the bonus side effects. Occasionally, instead of drowsiness, you get hyperactivity. The baby who couldn't sleep is now wide awake, determined to rearrange the kitchen using only their eyebrows and the power of interpretive dance. Or maybe they're suddenly the philosopher in residence, asking the unanswerable questions. Why do spoons exist? What if nap time is an illusion? All of this is met with sage nods from the older relatives, who remind you that babies are always a little odd when they're teething, as if existential pondering is a normal developmental milestone. Of course, there are less whimsical moments too. Some babies get cranky, some get itchy, and some go on a 24-hour hunger strike. The phrase may cause mild discomfort covers a lot of ground. Still, in an era where trial and error is the only way forward, you're grateful the side effects are mostly temporary and sometimes genuinely hilarious. After all, if the worst consequence of a night's peace is your baby composing epic poetry about the family cat, maybe it's not the end of the world. So you watch, you wait, and you take notes. Next time, maybe half a dose, or maybe not, because in the wild world of 1900s patent medicines, every bottle is a mystery, every effect a surprise, and every trip to the moon just another night in the American nursery. With half the population self-medicating and the other half working 18-hour days in coal mines, nobody is asking too many questions about the neighbor's unusually quiet infants. It's easy to imagine that someone, somewhere, would sound the alarm about babies drifting off for 10 hours at a stretch, their cries replaced by a serene and vaguely suspicious silence. But in 1902, silence is golden and, frankly, hard to come by. Between the clang of the streetcar, the shriek of steam whistles, and the endless barrage of street vendors hawking eels and dubious sausages, peace and quiet are luxuries usually reserved for the dearly departed. If your baby is quiet, it's a cause for celebration, not concern. Maybe even a little envy. Everyone's tired. The parents, the kids, the doctor, even the local grocer who doubles as the town's only amateur detective. The grown-ups spend their days shoveling coal, hauling ice, sewing shirtwaists, or hand-churning butter until their arms threaten mutiny. Children aren't exempt, either. By age 5, most are contributing to the family business, whether it's running errands, scrubbing laundry, or holding down the porch so it doesn't float away. Nobody has time for idle curiosity about what's happening in the nursery next door. Add to that the fact that, thanks to the miracle of modern patent medicines, at least one member of every household is riding out the week in a mild, syrup-induced haze. Mom has her tonic, Dad his bitters, and the baby, of course, is taking a heroic nap courtesy of the finest chemistry Europe has to offer. Grandma keeps her nerves in check with a daily cordial, and even the family dog occasionally gets a dose of soothing liniment when the thunderstorm rolls in. Everyone is getting by, just a little more quietly than before. Questions do arise, but they're quickly batted away by the wisdom of the era. Babies sleep a lot, says the neighbor, who hasn't seen her own children awake since Memorial Day. It's good for them, assures the town doctor, who once read a pamphlet about the health benefits of rest and has been coasting on that knowledge ever since. If a child stirs only long enough to eat and then slips back into a syrupy slumber, well, that's just a sign that the medicine is working as intended. The concept of child development, as we understand it today, hasn't really caught on. If your baby is alive and not actively on fire, you're considered ahead of the curve. Nobody is charting milestones or holding wellness checks. There's no social media to document or judge your every parenting decision. Your only audience is the occasional visiting aunt who offers unsolicited advice and then takes a nap in the parlor, snoring gently until it's time for tea. Then there's the matter of trust, specifically blind trust. Patent medicines are advertised everywhere, from barn walls to theatre playbills, each one endorsed by men in white coats or grandmothers with improbably healthy complexions. If the ad says it's good for babies, and the neighbor's baby hasn't spontaneously combusted, that's evidence enough. There's an unspoken social contract: don't ask, don't tell, and definitely don't bring up the word addiction. It's a golden age for plausible deniability. And so, life hums along. Parents survive on hope, a dash of desperation, and the reassurance that if something were truly wrong, surely someone smarter, richer, or more awake would have said something by now. But nobody does, because everyone is too busy, too exhausted, or too blissfully sedated to notice. The end result? An entire nation rocked gently to sleep, one spoonful at a time, everyone dreaming that they're doing the right thing, because in an era this noisy, a little quiet is the greatest miracle of all. Heroin isn't the only star in the medicine cabinet. If your baby doesn't like syrup, you can always try cocaine drops, or Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, which contains enough morphine to tranquilize a circus horse. Let's take a quick inventory of your turn-of-the-century medicine shelf. It's not just a place to store hope. It's a dazzling buffet of substances that, in modern times, would be under lock, key, and 6 layers of security glass. You pick up a bottle and discover it's Dr. Allen's cocaine toothache drops. Right there on the label, in cheerful curly script, it promises instant relief and no more fussy babies. The active ingredient? Just a hearty dash of pure cocaine, straight from the same botanicals that would one day inspire the world's least relaxing crime dramas. And yes, these drops are actually for children, sometimes specifically for infants cutting their first teeth. A few drops on the gums, the ad says, and your little one will smile all night. And they do. They smile, they babble, and sometimes they reorganize your cutlery drawer at 3 a.m. But at least they're not crying. You'd think this would raise an eyebrow or two, but if the medicine works, nobody's complaining. Sleep-deprived parents across the nation are so grateful for a moment of peace that nobody stops to ask, should my toddler really have this much energy at midnight? But if cocaine isn't your family's flavor, the market has options. Enter Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, an iconic patent medicine so successful, it's practically a household deity. The main selling point? Morphine. Lots of it. Enough to soothe the nerves of even the crankiest infant, and possibly your next-door neighbor, your neighbor's horse, and everyone else on the block. Advertisements boast that millions of mothers recommend it. And why not? It guarantees sleep, quiet, and the sensation that all is right in the world, at least until the bottle runs dry. Not to be outdone, other medicine men jump on the bandwagon with their own formulations, paregoric liquid opium, for persistent coughs, laudanum for everything from headaches to heartbreak, and calomel, a delightful concoction that manages to combine opium, alcohol, and, for some reason, mercury. Because if a little relief is good, a little mercury is, well, definitely something. Adults aren't left out of the party. The medicine cabinet brims with elixirs, bitters, and restoratives for every ailment under the Sunday. Your husband, after a long day of wrangling machinery and existential dread, might reach for a bottle of Peruna, a tonic containing just enough alcohol to make him forget why he was upset in the first place. Grandma, meanwhile, swears by her wine of Kardui for ladies' complaints, which, according to the label, covers everything from insomnia to wandering thoughts. You start to suspect that everyone in the house is at least mildly sedated, stimulated, or, in some cases, both at the same time. Family life moves in a gentle, foggy rhythm. The kids nap, the parents relax, and nobody has the energy to ask hard questions. The only time anyone looks suspicious is when the bottle starts to run low. Suddenly, every cold cough or stubbed toe becomes an emergency that simply must be addressed by a spoonful of something magical. The true marvel is that nobody seems especially worried about any of this. The admen sing praises, the neighbors compare brands, and even the local doctor, when pressed, shrugs and offers a sample from his own stash. It works, he says, with all the authority of a man whose main medical tool is a large, unsterilized mustache. Of course, the children of this era do eventually grow up, sometimes with a fondness for jazz, sometimes with a strong opinion about the good old days. But for now, you reach for the bottle, trusting in modern science, consumer choice, and the soothing certainty that, at least tonight, you'll get some sleep, even if the family cat is up till dawn writing a manifesto. In the world of early American medicine, there's always competition. But in the race for quiet, every bottle is a winner. Teething is a deadly disease, says your great-aunt, whose medical credentials include surviving 12 siblings. Syrups, powders, amulets, every home remedy comes with side effects. But at least the heroin one worked. Let's step into the wild world of early 1900s teething science. A field less grounded in biology and more in superstition, folklore, and whatever your neighbor swears worked for her cousin's best friend's nephew. In this era, teething isn't viewed as a normal milestone, but as a harrowing medical crisis, ranked just below smallpox and well above stepping on a rusty nail. The belief is simple. Babies do not just get teeth, they battle them. And the battle leaves carnage. Your great-aunt, keeper of the family's oral history, and possibly a few loose teeth herself, leans in to share the wisdom of her day. When your cousin Billy was teething, he got a fever, broke out in spots, and saw angels in the pantry. They say a baby once bit through a wooden spoon and survived. Whether this is exaggeration, a misunderstanding of germs, or simply a creative attempt to keep children from chewing on the furniture, it hardly matters. The community consensus is clear. Teething is a test of the parent's soul and the baby's will to live. That's why the arsenal for soothing a teething baby is so well diverse. Start with the basics. Syrup. Not just any syrup, but one laced with enough narcotics to calm an ox. The thinking is simple. If you can't fix the problem, you can at least ensure nobody remembers it. The heroin-laced concoction sits next to the morphine syrup, next to the laudanum drops, each with a label more flowery and reassuring than the last. The side effects? Gentle drowsiness, occasional visions, or a newfound interest in reciting Edgar Allan Poe backwards. But at least the baby isn't crying. Then there are powders, magical little sachets you rub on the gums, blow in the baby's face, or, in a pinch, sprinkle on their crib. The ingredients range from sugar and chalk to mercury, camphor, and ground-up calming roots. If the powder didn't work, it was probably your fault for not following the directions, which usually involved reciting a prayer or standing on one foot during a full moon. For the more superstitious, amulets and charms are the remedy of choice. A wolf's tooth, tied on a string and hung around the baby's neck, is said to draw out the evil tooth spirits. If the baby survives both the teething and the risk of accidental strangulation, you can count yourself lucky. Other families swear by coral beads, blessed spoons, or even slices of raw potato fastened to the child's clothing like some sort of root vegetable medal of honor. Of course, every home remedy comes with its own side effects. Powders cause coughing fits, amulets get lost in the laundry. And the syrups, well, let's just say the babies nap deeply. The parents sigh with relief. And nobody mentions the possibility of addiction until at least 1910. Still, in a world where medical science is mostly guesswork, the best solution is whichever one produces quiet, however mysterious, the mechanism. If you ask the local doctor, who might double as the town's undertaker, he'll recommend whatever keeps the mother sane. And so the cycle continues. Babies get teeth, parents panic, and a parade of home remedies marches through the nursery, leaving behind a trail of empty bottles, odd trinkets, and whispered family legends. By the time your baby is done teething, you've tried everything but exorcism. And honestly, on some nights, you'd consider that too. But if the baby is sleeping, the house is quiet, and the wolf's tooth hasn't gone missing, that's victory. Because in the mayhem of early 20th century parenting, the science of soothing isn't really science at all. It's faith, folklore, and the desperate hope that the cure is only slightly worse than the disease. Wake up. Pour yourself a cup of black coffee laced with chicory and invigorating elixir. Then tend to your baby, who is sleeping like the world's tiniest, most suspicious angel. It's morning in 1902, and the sun peeks through thin, yellowing curtains, painting lines across your creaky wooden floor. The air is thick with a blend of last night's stew, this morning's coal smoke, and a trace of Dr. Alabaster's invigorating elixir, the only thing keeping your eyelids from sealing shut. You shuffle to the stove, nursing a headache that predates the invention of aspirin, and prepare your breakfast ritual. Strong coffee, a dash of chicory for robustness, and a liberal splash of whatever invigorating tonic you trust most. The label promises vitality, but you suspect it's just 70-proof moonshine with a dash of medicinal bitters. Either way, it does the trick. You glance over at the cradle, where your baby slumbers in a position that would alarm any modern pediatrician, flat on their back, arms sprawled, mouth agape. There's a peacefulness to it that's almost eerie, especially after the chorus of teething screams that serenaded you until well after midnight. The miracle syrup worked its wonders. Now you have the rarest commodity in the American home. Silence. You wonder if the syrup works a little too well, and check for the reassuring rise and fall of your baby's tiny chest. Then check again, just to be sure. The rest of the family begins to stir. Your spouse appears, hair askew, muttering about needing to clear the fog with another swig of restorative. The older children stumble out of bed, already bickering over who gets the unburnt side of the toast. Breakfast is a team effort. Someone's in charge of the fire. Someone else is meant to fetch water from a pump, a well, or if you're unlucky, a half-frozen bucket in the yard. And you wrangle the baby, who is still enjoying the after effects of last night's chemical lullaby. The kitchen table is a lively place, cluttered with chipped cups, a communal butter knife, and at least 3 bottles of medicine for various ailments. There's gentleman's stomach tonic for nerves, children's quieting syrup for everyone's nerves, and cough drops that promise relief and taste suspiciously like peppermint, mixed with regret. You hand out slices of bread, pour weak coffee for the older kids. Yes, even them. Milk is for babies, and only when the delivery isn't 3 days late. And try not to think about how many mystery ingredients your family is ingesting before 8 a.m. The baby finally stirs, blinking up at you with the wide-eyed innocence of someone who slept through a tornado. You hoist them out of the cradle, only to realize their nightgown is now decorated with biscuit crumbs, lint, and possibly a stray safety pin. Time for a quick wipe down with a rag that once belonged to your great-uncle and now pulls double duty as a napkin, dust cloth, and emergency bandage. There's no time for leisurely mornings. The chores await. You set the older kids to work sweeping, washing, and negotiating a treaty over the use of the family's only comb. Your spouse heads out to start the day's work, factory, field, or forge, depending on what part of America you're in. You make a mental note to stop by the pharmacy for more syrup for the baby, more tonic for yourself, and perhaps a word of reassurance from the pharmacist, who moonlights as the town's therapist. By 9 o'clock, you've already refereed 2 sibling disputes, cleaned up a mystery spill, checked the baby's pulse again, and found someone's shoe in the bread box. You feel accomplished, if slightly unhinged. The day has barely begun, and you're already running on hope, habit, and the faint medicinal buzz of the morning's elixir. And through it all, your baby remains the calm in the domestic storm, snoozing away, proof that in 1902, a peaceful morning is less about rest and more about mastering the delicate balance of caffeine, chemicals, and relentless American optimism. The government's stance on child safety is, let's see what happens. There are no FDA warnings, no ingredient lists, and if something goes wrong, well, that's just life in the land of opportunity. Step inside the American household of 1902, and you're entering a place where the concept of product safety is as futuristic as flying cars. Every shelf is a choose-your-own-adventure of mild peril. The medicine cabinet, the kitchen pantry, and even the toy box are all part of the same ongoing science experiment. One where the only constant is your complete ignorance about what's inside anything you buy. Take a stroll down to your local apothecary, and you'll find bottles of soothing syrup, nerve tonic, and elixir of quietude arranged in neat rows, their labels painted with flowers, cherubs, and promises of immediate relief. Flip them around, and you won't find an ingredient list. Instead, maybe there's a testimonial from Mrs. W. of New Haven, who claims her twins are so peaceful. It's as if the Lord himself tucked them in. There's no mention that the Lord's helper was a heaping spoonful of morphine. If the bottle says for infants, that's proof enough. And if something goes wrong, if little Billy reacts badly to his cough cure or gets a rash from his soothing powder, the recourse is to write a letter to the company, wait 8 to 12 weeks for a response, and, in the meantime, probably try a competing brand. Complaints are often met with a polite, handwritten note promising to do better next time, usually signed by the same man who painted the label. Refunds are theoretical, like unicorns or affordable dental care. There is no Food and Drug Administration, at least not yet. The Pure Food and Drug Act won't arrive until 1906, and until then, manufacturers are free to put pretty much anything in a bottle and call it progress. Cocaine? Absolutely. Lead? Sure, it makes paint more vibrant. Radium? Why not? It glows. The line between medicine and poison is a blurry suggestion, and the general attitude is that if you're still standing after taking it, you must be healthy enough. Childproofing is not just missing, it's a punchline. Safety caps are decades away, so every bottle opens with a satisfying pop, just waiting for curious little hands to explore. Toys are made of sharp metal, real glass, and sometimes, for variety, actual animal teeth. If it's dangerous, just put it on a higher shelf, says every parent, who then immediately forgets to do so. The Most protective parents might tie a rag around the bottle or scrawl "not for baby" in pencil, but that's the extent of early 20th century risk mitigation. Even the experts aren't much help. The local doctor, who might be part-time barber or part-time blacksmith, shrugs and tells you to trust your instincts. Newspapers run columns with headlines like, "Is your child too quiet?" followed by an ad for a new syrup guaranteed to knock out even the fussiest tot. If someone does raise concerns, they're accused of being nervous, hysterical, or worse, European. If disaster does strike, the wisdom is passed down as family law. Aunt Millie went deaf in one ear after the pink drops. Someone recalls over Sunday supper, but her hair never looked shinier. There's a collective agreement that life is risky, children are resilient, and if all else fails, the next baby will probably turn out fine. In the end, you marvel at how anyone survived childhood. The lack of regulation is both terrifying and, in retrospect, almost impressive. It's a national pastime. Roll the dice, pass the tonic, and hope for the best. Because in the American Hall of Fame, nothing says pioneer spirit quite like giving your baby a mystery bottle and seeing what happens next. Sometimes you wonder if the syrup actually works or if everyone is just pretending to see results because nobody wants to admit they drugged their child. Denial, the real American pastime. It's the quiet after the storm. You've administered the miracle syrup. The baby has gone silent, and now you're left with nothing but the ticking of the clock and the distant, haunting memory of what used to be a normal household decibel level. You watch your child, sleeping, drooling, possibly dreaming of floating through the stars, and ask yourself, is this medicine? Or just a really elaborate confidence trick? The pamphlet certainly promised a lot. Instant calm, unbroken rest, teeth that pop through the gums as if by divine intervention. The testimonials raved about it. Your neighbor swears by it, your cousin sends you bottles from out of state, and even the pharmacist gives you a subtle, knowing nod when you pick up your third jar of the week. But somewhere, in the back of your mind, a little voice whispers, "Are we all just faking it?" This is where the true magic of the placebo effect shines. A phenomenon so powerful it can soothe both babies and grown-ups with nothing more than hope, sugar, and a pinch of guilt. There's a deep, collective desire for something to work. If the baby seems calmer, even if they're just pausing to catch their breath, you chalk it up as a win for modern science and your own decision-making skills. No one wants to be the first to say, maybe it's all in our heads. That would mean admitting defeat, or worse, admitting that the family budget now includes a line item for snake oil. Denial has always been a favorite American coping strategy. In 1902, it's practically a national sport. Did Grandma's arthritis improve because of the liniment, or because she finally stopped trying to reshingle the roof? Did the baby's colic resolve thanks to the syrup, or because all babies eventually tire themselves out? No one knows, and nobody asks too many questions. Instead, you swap success stories with other parents, each tale growing more impressive with every retelling. After just 2 doses, little Martha slept for 10 hours straight and learned the alphabet backwards. Billy's teeth came in so fast we thought he was part beaver. There's a certain comfort in collective self-delusion. If everyone agrees the syrup works, then it does. You reassure each other at the general store and at church socials, passing on recipes, dosages, and pro tips like a sacred oral tradition. If anyone's child happens to cry through the night, it's clearly because they didn't use the right brand, or they skimped on the recommended dose, or perhaps the moon was in the wrong phase. The truth, whatever it is, doesn't stand a chance against the overwhelming power of groupthink, reinforced by relentless advertising and neighborly one-upmanship. Sometimes, in quieter moments, you try to be scientific. You go a night without the syrup. The baby cries, and you collapse in defeat. See? You tell yourself, it's obviously the medicine. Never mind that the baby also cried after the syrup last week, or that you might be a few hours away from another breakthrough. Doubt isn't welcome here. There's a bottle for that too. On the rare occasion someone questions the system, the group closes ranks. Are you saying my mother was wrong? Asks your aunt, bristling with family pride and the lingering scent of liniment. Are you saying your baby isn't special? Whispers a neighbor, whose infant has been napping so long you've started to wonder if they're hibernating. So the placebo paradox continues, generation after generation. Maybe the syrup works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just the hope, the ritual, and the desperate need for a break. Either way, you pour another spoonful, share another success story, and keep the secret safe. Because in the early 1900s, sometimes believing is half the cure, and the other half is not asking too many questions. You swap advice with the neighbor. She suggests half a spoonful for her little darling. You try it, then try a full spoonful. By the third night, the recommended dose is whatever gets you through to sunrise. Welcome to the true engine of 1902 American medicine. The back fence, the front porch, and the sacred society of exhausted mothers united by desperation and denial. Forget government guidelines or doctor's orders. The real wisdom circulates among the women who are knee-deep in diapers, baby bottles, and existential dread. These are the unofficial pharmacists of the era, blending folk remedies with whatever the apothecary has on sale, all in the name of a good night's sleep. It starts innocently. Maybe you're hanging laundry in the yard, and Mrs. Abernathy next door waves you over with a conspiratorial glint in her eye. She leans in, clutching her own miracle syrup, and whispers, "Only give little Georgie half a spoonful or he'll nap straight through till Tuesday." You nod, grateful for the advice, then immediately question your own technique. Have you been overdosing? Underdosing? Was that last tablespoon a bit too generous, or just enough to guarantee the only thing standing between you and insanity is a bottle of Dr. McGinty's soothing tonic? The whisper network grows as the days drag on and nights get longer. You run into Mrs. Howard at the grocer's, both of you looking like you've just survived a shipwreck. She confides that she adds a splash of whiskey to the syrup for flavor. Mrs. Lee on the corner swears by rubbing the baby's gums with clove oil, but only after the syrup, to really seal the deal. The conversation turns into a subtle competition. Who can get the quietest baby, the deepest sleep, and the fewest public meltdowns? Soon, dosing becomes an art form. There's the preemptive strike, a dose at dusk, just in case. The midnight rescue, when all else fails. And the double down, reserved for when teething and colic decide to join forces. You lose track of the official directions on the bottle. Were you supposed to use the tiny spoon, the larger spoon, or just eyeball it? By now, precision has given way to a system based entirely on results. If the baby is quiet, you're doing it right. This is not just practical medicine. It's social glue. The whisper network is where mothers admit the truth behind closed doors. That sometimes you have no idea what you're doing, and neither does anyone else. You share failures as much as successes. I tried the syrup and she was up dancing in her crib till dawn, says Mrs. Kelly. Mine only works if I sing My Bonny Lies over the ocean at the same time, chimes in another mom. There's camaraderie and commiseration, proof that nobody is alone in their confusion or their creative dosing strategies. Of course, the network has its risks. Every now and then, word gets around about a mother who overdid it. There are whispers of the Jones baby, who slept for an entire day and had to be checked for breathing every hour. But these are cautionary tales. traded over back fences and at church potlucks, and quickly brushed aside by the next crisis. A new tooth, a fever, a wail that can shatter windows. It's not all grim. There's humour, too, a kind of wry gallows laughter that only sleep deprivation can produce. You make jokes about infant cocktails and invent new blends, half syrup, half wishful thinking. Someone proposes selling a special line of Mother's Little Helper measuring spoons, with marks for fussy, howling, and dear God, please stop. By the third night, as you measure out whatever it takes to get through to sunrise, you realize the real secret isn't in the bottle. It's in the network. The comfort of knowing you're not the only one winging it, improvising, and praying that tomorrow will be easier. And as dawn breaks, you share a knowing glance with the neighbor, both of you clutching empty bottles and new stories for the next whisper session. Sometimes survival is about medicine, but mostly, it's about not having to do it alone. It isn't just struggling families. Wealthy parents are dosing their babies, too. You visit a friend's house and marvel at the crystal decanter labeled Infant Comforter. If it's good enough for the Rockefellers, it must be safe, right? Stepping into a wealthy home in 1902 is like entering an alternate universe, one filled with velvet drapes, heavy furniture, and rugs so thick you could lose a toddler for weeks. The nursery isn't a drafty corner or a repurposed closet. It's a pastel palace with imported wallpaper, lace, curtains, and a mountain of plush toys stuffed with whatever the Victorians thought was hypoallergenic. You might think the upper class has found the secret to stress-free parenting, but as it turns out, money buys comfort, not clarity, and definitely not common sense. The centerpiece of every elite nursery is the sideboard of remedies, glimmering under gaslight, silver spoons, cut glass jars, and yes, that magnificent decanter labeled Infant Comforter. Unlike the battered bottles cluttering your own shelf, this one is faceted crystal, etched with swirling patterns, and topped by a stopper as heavy as a baby's first shoe. The label reads like a love letter to modern science, a gentle aid to restful slumber, endorsed by leading physicians and satisfied heirs. No mention, of course, that the main ingredient could out-relax a prize-winning racehorse. Here, the rituals of medicine are elevated to performance art. The governess, never nanny, always governess because French is in, measures out a dose with a sterling silver teaspoon, stirs it into a cup of warm milk, and hands it to the drowsy air with the same gravity as a priest offering communion. The baby, dressed in linen so fine you're afraid to breathe near it, swallows, sighs, and promptly drifts off to a dreamland where teething pain is just a rumor. You glance around the room. On the mantel, there are signed testimonials from famous doctors, letters embossed with wax seals, and a framed advertisement featuring a cherubic baby in what looks suspiciously like a diamond tiara. The message is clear. This family isn't just surviving, they're thriving, with a little chemical help from their pharmaceutical friends. But here's the real twist. Wealth does not, in fact, buy skepticism. If anything, the well-to-do are even more devoted to the patent medicine parade. The more expensive the bottle, the more miraculous its claims. If the neighbor down the street gives her child a penny's worth of syrup, your society friend insists on the gold-capped version, infused with aromatic botanicals and a dash of old-world wisdom. Red. Stronger narcotics. It's a mark of class to have the right syrup. The imported one, preferably recommended by an obscure European duke or a lady's maid who once summered in Vienna. And it isn't just for the children. The grown-ups have their own restoratives, lining the liquor cabinet right next to the brandy and port. Lady Astor's evening elixir for nerves, Lord Bellington's digestive drops for late-night gout, and the universal society tonic for when entertaining gets overwhelming and there are just too many duchesses to impress. If the conversation lulls at dinner, it's not because anyone is bored. It's because half the guests have slipped into a pleasant opiate haze between the soup and the roast. Still, appearances must be maintained. The nursemaid quietly tucks the decanter away before visitors arrive, and any mention of chemical aids brushed aside with a practiced smile. Of course, our darling just needs a gentle nudge to sleep, your friend whispers, as if the secret ingredient is maternal affection rather than pharmaceutical engineering. In the end, the only real difference between rich and poor is the quality of the packaging and the size of the bill at the end of the month. Whether poured from cut crystal or chipped crockery, the goal is the same: peace, quiet, and the dream that someone, somewhere, has finally figured out how to outsmart a teething baby. And as you take one last look at the glittering decanter, you remind yourself, if it's good enough for the Rockefellers, surely you're not that far off. Just maybe a little less well-rested. Somewhere, a group of gentlemen in waistcoats are discussing preliminary findings that heroin syrup is perfectly harmless in children. Their sample size: 2 babies, a goat, and an alarming lack of skepticism. This is the dawn of scientific progress. 1902 style. A world where peer review means your friend at the apothecary nods approvingly, and clinical trials are whatever happens between tea time and supper. Picture the scene. A wood-paneled parlor, thick with cigar smoke and bravado. Several serious men gather around a table littered with bottles, notes scribbled in sprawling script, and the remains of a fruitcake that's probably as lethal as half the medicine under review. Dr. Whitworth, who calls himself the grandfather of American pediatrics, credentials, grew up near a hospital, owned a lab coat, stands to deliver the group's latest breakthrough. Gentlemen, after extensive observation, we conclude that heroin syrup produces restful slumber, cheerful dispositions, and a marked increase in parental sanity. He gestures to a ledger. All test subjects have survived, except for the goat, and that's a dietary issue, not medicinal. The research is both earnest and astonishingly casual. One baby, Dr. Whitworth's own nephew, chosen for robust constitution, slept through a thunderstorm, 2 fires, and the neighbor's ill-advised tuba lesson. The second baby, borrowed from a friend for scientific advancement, displayed no adverse effects except for a tendency to giggle at the wallpaper. The goat, as it turns out, was simply not cut out for the rigors of modern pharmacology. The gentlemen record their observations with gravity. Did the child exhibit any signs of distress? One asks, peering over pince-nez spectacles. No more than usual, comes the reply, though the wallpaper laughter was rather pronounced. Another scribbles in his notebook. Parental units report improvements in mood and dinner table civility. That's the sort of data you can take straight to the advertising department. No one questions the lack of long-term studies. If there's no immediate collapse, it's perfectly safe, says Dr. Whitworth, a phrase later immortalized on 1,000 medicine bottles. Dosage recommendations are calculated on the fly, often by gut feeling or, if feeling particularly rigorous, the volume of the first spoon that comes to hand. If results are ambiguous, simply add more syrup and try again. Occasionally, someone suggests a control group. This is met with polite laughter, followed by a toast to American ingenuity. What could possibly go wrong? Babies are resilient. And if the goat can't keep up, that's hardly the medicine's fault. Outside the parlor, real mothers and fathers are desperate for solutions, and the men in waistcoats are all too happy to supply them. The research makes its way into medical journals with names like the Journal of Maternal Quietude and Dr. McGrath's monthly review of general robustness. The articles are packed with scientific language. Anecdotal evidence strongly supports efficacy. The cohort displayed marked tranquility, statistically significant improvements in household mood. Never mind that statistically significant means everyone felt a little better after a nap. If any worries do arise, they're brushed aside with confidence. Heroin is gentler than morphine, gentlemen, and far less habit-forming. Never mind that the goat is now addicted to eating hats, and one baby refuses to sleep without the bottle gripped in both fists. That's just an enthusiastic response to therapy, Dr. Whitworth reassures his colleagues. This is the grand age of early medical research, where a study can be completed before dessert and published before anyone bothers to double-check the results. The scientific process is more aspiration than reality, and skepticism is strictly for those who want to get uninvited to the next cigar night. And so, the miracle syrup marches on, endorsed by gentlemen, proven by goats, and trusted by parents who just want one peaceful night in the wild west of American medicine. You notice your baby is not quite herself when the syrup runs out. There's more fussing, more crying, and a new nervous tick. The pamphlet blames temperament. Modern science calls it pharmacological horror show. At first, you assume it's just a rough day. Maybe there's a tooth pushing through. Maybe the neighbors are being especially loud. Maybe you've accidentally angered the gods of sleep by washing a blanket on a Thursday. But then the pattern emerges. The syrup bottle runs dry, and suddenly your previously blissed-out baby is transformed into a pint-sized maelstrom of wailing, clinging, and existential despair. There's a tremor in the air, and possibly in your child's tiny hands. You dig out the pamphlet again, desperate for reassurance. It promises gentle sleep, happy awakenings, and no habit formed. If there's a section on withdrawal, it's tucked somewhere between occasional fussiness and rare moments of spirited vocalization. Your baby's spirited vocalization, however, now comes with a red face, a steady stream of tears, and a look in her eye that says, "I know what you did." The house, once so tranquil, is suddenly alive with a new kind of tension. Every squeak of the floor, every dog bark outside, sets off another round of crying. You rock, you bounce, you offer favorite toys and cold washcloths. Nothing helps. There's a sense of suspicion in your baby's gaze, as if she's realized that the sweet, miraculous syrup was more than just a treat. It was, in fact, the only thing standing between her and a complete meltdown. The pamphlet assures you it's all a phase. Some infants may display increased sensitivity as their temperament develops. It chirps. Patience and loving care are the best remedies. What it doesn't mention is that increased sensitivity can mean an Olympic-level tantrum at 2 a.m., a refusal to nap, and an entirely new mysterious twitch in your child's left eyebrow. You find yourself patting the empty bottle like a friend you wronged. The old remedies stop working. The rubber teething ring is rejected with a disdainful glare. The family dog, once a source of endless entertainment, now gets scolded for breathing too loudly. Every failed attempt at comfort brings you closer to the realization that this isn't just teething, it's what future generations will call withdrawal. Right now, though, you just call it Thursday. You start to notice things. Your baby gnaws on her fist with alarming dedication. She fusses, then quiets, then fusses again, as if waiting for someone to bring back the good stuff. She can't settle, can't sleep, and for reasons unknown, suddenly hates the taste of mashed carrots. You consult your neighbors, quietly of course, because nobody wants to be the first to admit they're raising a tiny narcotics enthusiast. The consensus is split. Half say it's just a stage. The other half recommend a spoonful of a different syrup, one with a slightly different label, maybe a hint of peppermint, and, if you're lucky, a new set of side effects. You begin to realize just how fragile peace can be in the American nursery. All those nights of blissful sleep came at a price, and the bill is now due. The baby's personality is less about temperament and more about biochemistry, though nobody says that out loud. Instead, you join the chorus. She's just adjusting, you say at church, hoping no one sees the bags under your eyes. She's extra-spirited, you explain to your spouse, who looks one bad night away from inventing time travel just to get a nap. Meanwhile, the pharmacies keep selling, the pamphlets keep promising, and parents everywhere hope the next bottle will be the answer. After all, the elephant in the nursery is easy to ignore, right up until it wakes up and demands its syrup. In the end, you pour another cup of coffee, rock your irritable bundle, and wonder how something designed to help you sleep turned into the main reason you can't. Your local pharmacist assures you that his homemade formula is better than store-bought. His qualifications? He once took a correspondence course in general chemistry and beard maintenance. Your local pharmacist assures you that his homemade formula is better than store-bought. His qualifications? He once took a correspondence course in general chemistry and beard maintenance. Welcome to the golden age of American pharmacy, where the line between medical professional and enthusiastic hobbyist is more of a polite suggestion than a legal boundary. The neighborhood druggist is a fixture on Main Street. Half scientist, half bartender, and half therapist. Yes, in 1902 math, you're allowed 3 halves if you're a small-town pharmacist. His shop smells like peppermint, turpentine, and ambition. Behind the counter stands a man whose mustache alone has witnessed more chemical reactions than the average laboratory. When you step inside, the bell on the door announces your arrival with the shrill confidence of someone who's never overdosed on syrup. The shelves are crammed with bottles, jars, and tins. Some store-bought, many obviously hand-labeled, a few with handwritten notes that read "Trust me," or, more ominously, "New and improved." The pharmacist greets you by name, asks about the family, and before you can even voice your concerns, is already recommending his latest concoction. Store-bought? He scoffs, polishing a glass jar with a rag that looks suspiciously like last year's tax return. All mass-produced and impersonal. My formula is made with care and a secret ingredient. You hope it's not the same secret ingredient he uses in his hair tonic, which smells like paint thinner and lost dreams. He moves behind the counter and starts mixing. A dash of this, a pinch of that. A glug from an unlabeled bottle, he tosses in a few dried herbs for good measure. Soothing botanicals, he calls them, and tops it all off with a swirl from a bottle marked with a skull. For authenticity, he assures you. The process is less chemistry and more interpretive dance, accompanied by a running monologue about the healing power of local flora, good old-fashioned know-how, and the value of trusting your gut. He has an anecdote for every ailment. Fixed up Mrs. Bingham's twins. In no time, they haven't cried since the last election. You glance around. On the wall is a faded certificate from the Midwest Institute of Advanced Compoundery. Possibly real, possibly won in a poker game. Another diploma promises proficiency in applied pharmacognosy and practical mustachery, which, in 1902, basically means he once read half a book and grew impressive facial hair. Customers come and go, all with similar requests. Teething baby, sleepless toddler, nerves frayed to the breaking point. The pharmacist doles out custom blends with the flair of a magician, assuring each parent that this batch is specially formulated for your child's temperament. The instructions are usually vague, a teaspoon as needed, or until calmness prevails. And if you press for details, he just winks and tells you there's a little art, not just science. Of course, the real selling point is community trust. He knows everyone's business, who's got a new baby, who's on their 3rd bottle this week, whose child can sleep through a parade thanks to Uncle Edgar's restorative drops. He swaps recipes with the other local pharmacists at the Masonic Lodge, all in the name of progress. If something goes wrong, he'll be the first to visit, bottle in hand, offering condolences and a free sample of his latest and greatest. No one asks too many questions about what's actually in the medicine. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, there's always next week's blend. The pharmacist's real genius is convincing you that your family's health depends not on science, but on his unique mix of charisma, beard oil, and whatever he could find in the root cellar. And as you leave the shop, clutching your bottle of homemade miracle syrup, you realize that in the early 20th century, the only thing more important than ingredients was faith. Faith in the pharmacist, faith in the process, and faith that, with enough beard maintenance, even the wildest chemical experiment could be made to work at least until the next batch. Rumors spread. The government is considering regulating patent medicines. The local paper warns of overreach, but you're mostly concerned about what on earth you'll use for teething now. Whiskey? It starts as a whisper at the general store, travels through the church pews, and finally lands in your own kitchen. Government men in Washington are thinking about stepping in. "They're coming for our syrups," Mrs. Abernathy declares, waving her flour-dusted hands. "First they'll take the morphine, then they'll come for the catnip." She says it with the certainty of someone who's weathered 3 tornadoes and 1 unfortunate mayonnaise shortage. You open the local newspaper, which is bracing for battle. Headlines scream about the end of American innovation and government, snooping in our medicine chests. The editorials make it sound like the federal agents are about to storm every nursery in the country, prying bottles from mothers' trembling hands, and leaving the nation's babies to face the terror of teething unaided. In the margin, an advertisement for a new herb-based tonic slyly reassures customers that its ingredients are completely unregulated for now. For most parents, the panic isn't philosophical, it's practical. What happens when the syrup is gone? Do you bring back the whiskey-soaked rag, the cold potato amulet, or just let the baby scream and hope the neighbors are understanding? A hush falls over the playground as mothers swap recipes for homemade remedies, comparing the merits of ginger root and moonshine. Suddenly, everyone's an amateur apothecary, and the real winner is the local bootlegger, who sees a surge in business from desperate parents willing to try anything but sleeplessness. The town's pharmacist is flustered. He's been blending miracle cures for decades, and now faces the horrifying prospect of ingredient lists, warning labels, and, worst of all, inspections. "Why? I've never poisoned a child in my life," he exclaims, as if that alone qualifies him for a Nobel Prize. Behind the counter, he hurriedly rearranges his most suspicious jars and hopes the new law will have more loopholes than a fishing net. The doctors, some legitimate, some just well-dressed optimists, split into camps. One group insists that government regulation is the dawn of true scientific progress. The other says it's the end of parental freedom as we know it. Meanwhile, the oldest doctor in town quietly suggests returning to the old ways. "Warm brandy and a lullaby, that's how my mother did it. And look at me." He is, at this point, 86 and convinced that coughs are caused by bad moods. Of course, there are parents who welcome the change. "I always wondered what was in that syrup," confides Mrs. Kelly, who's recently become suspicious after noticing her toddler napping for 8 hours straight, and then reciting the alphabet backwards. But most are just hoping the crackdown will be delayed until their youngest gets all their teeth. "Let's not be hasty," says your neighbor, who has 4 more molars to go and a healthy fear of unmedicated bedtime. Nationally, the patent medicine tycoons are scrambling to rebrand. Some swap out opium for extra sugar and call it Kinder syrup. Others slap the words natural or herbal on their bottles and hope nobody asks for details. A few offer public demonstrations, "See? Our syrup is harmless. where volunteer babies are paraded before the crowd, smiling vaguely and drooling on command. Soon enough, the laws arrive. Bottles disappear, recipes change, and suddenly there are things like dosage instructions and side effect warnings in tiny print. The era of Wild West medicine is over, and with it, a strange chapter in American parenting closes. Some mourn the loss, others breathe a sigh of relief, and a few just pour a shot of whiskey, this time for themselves. And as your baby gnaws on a cold spoon and wails at the injustice of regulation, you can't help but wonder, was it better when no one knew what was in the bottle? Or now, when everyone knows, and nobody wants to talk about it? Either way, bedtime will never be the same. Suddenly, everyone's worried about poisoning the youth. Politicians demand action, but nobody is eager to recall that everyone was doing it. Cue the great forgetting. It all begins with a headline, bold and breathless. Scandal in the nursery. Is America dosing its babies? The story spreads faster than a cold in a one-room schoolhouse. What was once considered good, practical parenting, helping your baby and yourself get some rest, becomes public enemy number one. The syrup bottle, once a badge of wisdom, is now a symbol of reckless endangerment. Overnight, the same parents who swore by their nightly dose start hiding the evidence, tucking bottles behind flour canisters or, if especially panicked, behind that mysterious tin of pickled eel no one ever opens. In town meetings and on the front pages, the mood shifts from casual denial to full-blown hysteria. Have you seen how quiet the Jones baby is? Mrs. Abernathy hisses at the market, as if silence itself is suspicious. I heard he hasn't cried since Labor Day. Suddenly, all quiet babies are suspects, and all fussy ones are poster children for clean living. The pharmacy windows fill with new signs. Drug-free remedies sold here. And, in smaller print, ask about our new herbal spoons. Politicians, sensing an opportunity, take the stage to loudly condemn the drug menace lurking in America's cradles. There are speeches, committees, and public debates. It's a national emergency, bellows Senator Carbuncle, who only last year posed for an ad holding his own restful syrup while his grandson napped like a rock. No one mentions the doctor's samples still rattling in his desk drawer. Suddenly, everyone has always been against heroin syrup. Of course, I never used it, says Mrs. Howard, whose pantry still rattles with half-empty bottles. My cousin did, but I warned her. Family stories are quietly revised. You were a colicky baby, but we toughed it out, says your mother, who once swore by a brand called Naptime Nectar. The narrative shifts from everyone did it to no one respectable did it. Anyone who suggests otherwise is met with a knowing look and a change of subject. This is the era of the great forgetting. The local paper publishes cautionary tales, tragic stories of mothers who didn't know better, and the children who, according to legend, slept for 3 days and woke up speaking French. Church sermons rail against the dangers of chemical parenting. Though the preacher's wife is seen discreetly asking for anything for nerves at the pharmacy later that week, suddenly, the biggest threat to the family isn't the croup or scarlet fever, but the faint, lingering suspicion that you might have accidentally given your child a taste for poetry and opiates. Mothers whisper new advice at quilting bees and church socials. Don't mention the syrup, just say you used chamomile. Grandfathers, who grew up on a steady diet of laudanum and unfiltered pond water, shake their heads and proclaim, "We were tougher in my day." Meanwhile, the patent medicine men vanish into the night or rebrand as wellness experts, hawking bitters and tonics that promise the same results, now with extra moral fiber. History books will one day look back on this time with a mixture of horror and disbelief. But in the moment, it's all about blame and survival. Nobody wants to be remembered as the villain in the story, so everyone points fingers elsewhere, conveniently forgetting that last winter's best holiday gift was a crate of soothing syrup and a good night's sleep. As for the babies, they eventually get their teeth, sometimes with a little more fuss, a little less syrup, and a lot more bedtime stories. The nation moves on, invents new crises, and collectively pretends that the era of narcotic nap time was just a strange dream. But every so often, someone finds an old bottle tucked in the attic, reads the faded label, and wonders just how much forgetting it takes to call it progress. With the syrup off shelves, the patent medicine men start selling electric belts, magnetic socks, and bovine nerve elixir. At least none of these contain heroin that you know of. It's the dawn of a new era. The shelves that once gleamed with opiate-laced syrup and cocaine drops are suddenly suspiciously empty. Where syrup bottles stood in proud formation, there are now odd gadgets and new concoctions with names so creative you can feel the desperation in the patent office. The medicine men, never ones to let a good panic go to waste, have reinvented themselves overnight, swapping chemistry for electrical wizardry and anything they can get past a government inspector with weak glasses. You step into the pharmacy expecting the familiar row of miracle tonics, but now the centerpiece is a glittering array of health technologies. First up, the electric belt. It's a wide leather strap, studded with copper buttons and a dangling wire, guaranteed to invigorate the entire body and restore one's natural humors. The local ad claims that just 15 minutes a day will make you as energetic as a 6-year-old with a new slingshot. It does not specify if the energy is from electricity or the shock of being zapped on the backside by a faulty battery pack. Next, you find magnetic socks, woolly, slightly itchy, and allegedly aligned to the Earth's curative forces. A satisfied customer, the pharmacist's uncle, is quoted on a hand-drawn sign. "Ever since I put these on, my bunions can predict the weather, and my knees never squeak." You're tempted to try a pair, but you're still recovering from last year's experiment with oxygenated undergarments. There's bovine nerve elixir, a cloudy liquid that claims to restore the tranquility of the contented cow. The label features a smiling Holstein and a list of herbal ingredients so lengthy and suspiciously vague, you wonder if the cow made it up herself. At least, you tell yourself, the odds of opiates are lower, unless cows have been hiding a secret stash all along. With each new cure comes an even wilder pitch. The revitalizing hat promises to stimulate the scalp and sharpen wits, thanks to a series of mysterious wires that look suspiciously like the insides of a broken umbrella. The galvanic soap claims to electrify dirt right off your skin and possibly your dignity. The solar inhaler is advertised as a sun-powered nose tube, recommended by 3 out of 4 retired physicians. The one who didn't recommend it is, presumably, still on the fence. People are eager to believe. After all, the old syrups, for all their risks, actually did something. If by something you mean knocked everyone out cold. The new devices buzz, tingle, or merely confuse, but hope springs eternal in the human heart. If your baby is still teething and you can't get your hands on narcotic syrup, maybe an electrified teething ring or a dab of auric lotion will be just the ticket. The worst that can happen, you reason, is a few frizzy hairs and a story for the next family reunion. The patent medicine men, ever resourceful, are now health inventors and wellness experts. They've mastered the art of the loophole. If it's not technically a drug, it can't technically be regulated, at least not yet. Their advertisements grow even bolder, featuring testimonials from glamorous housewives, grinning farmhands, and at least one mayor who claims that since using the bovine nerve elixir, My speeches are 3 minutes shorter, and my cows are less anxious. In the end, everyone muddles through. Parents keep searching for the next miracle. Babies get their teeth. Eventually. And the next generation of Americans learns to treat all new cures with a combination of skepticism, humor, and the deep-seated hope that at least this time, nothing will glow in the dark. Because if there's one constant in the American quest for health, it's that when one door closes, another one opens. Sometimes with a small electric shock. Decades later, your grandparents laugh about the time we all took syrup and napped for 3 days. Family resilience or collective trauma. Either way, it's a bonding experience. Time, as it turns out, is the great equalizer of embarrassment and questionable parenting. What once kept your ancestors up at night with worry, or, thanks to patent syrup, didn't, becomes the stuff of legend, retold every Thanksgiving between helpings of mashed potatoes and sideways glances at the family baby. "Oh, you think you've had a rough week?" Your grandpa cackles. "Back in my day, we teethed on laudanum and lived to tell the tale." The stories always begin the same way: a frazzled parent, a screaming baby, and a bottle of syrup with a label so faded it's more suggestion than information. What follows is a heroic feat of collective forgetfulness, recounted with pride and a little bravado. Grandma gave us all a spoonful before the county fair and had to carry us home in a wheelbarrow, someone recalls, face shining with nostalgia or possibly residual opiates. What was once an act of desperation has become family folklore. The tale of the 3-day nap is retold with laughter. Never mind the mild panic your great-grandmother felt when the children slept through 2 meals and the neighbor's barn dance. "It's just the syrup working," she told herself, checking pulses with a chicken feather and trusting in the power of denial. The memory of worry has faded. What remains is the absurdity, the relief, and the feeling that they faced it together, syrup bottle in hand. Every branch of the family tree has its own variation. One uncle claims he developed his love for jazz during those syrup-fueled dreams. An aunt swears the only reason she survived chickenpox was the good doctor's calming tonic. Someone always mentions a cousin who slept so soundly he missed his own birthday. Laughter peals around the table, the present generation marveling at the casual madness of it all. But beneath the jokes is something real. A resilience born of doing what you had to do with what you had, in a world where survival often meant improvisation and a high tolerance for ambiguity. The same syrup that soothed babies through teething also soothed mothers through long, lonely nights and taught families the valuable art of not overthinking things you can't control. Sometimes, the old tales prompt a hint of awkwardness. A grandchild wonders aloud if maybe the family's collective quirks are less genetic and more pharmaceutical in origin. There are sidelong looks, a moment of introspection, then another round of pie. In this family, and so many others, the scars of the past have mostly healed, leaving stories that are both cautionary and comforting. "We didn't know any better," Grandpa shrugs, "but we sure did sleep." It's not all nostalgia. Sometimes there's a lesson tucked between the punchlines that most generations muddle through with tools they hope are good enough. Guided by love and desperation, and whatever the neighbor swears worked last winter. You'll have your own stories, the elders promise, just don't judge ours too harshly. Every era's got its madness. In the end, family lore is less about what went wrong than what went right. That everyone somehow made it through, teeth and all, with a few stories to share. The syrup, the naps, and the oddities are woven into the fabric of us, proof that resilience is as much about laughing at the past as it is surviving it. So the next time your baby's fussy and your nerves are shot, remember, one day this too will be a story. And if you're lucky, someone will laugh about it long after the last bottle has faded from memory. You wonder if you could make it a week as a parent in 1902, armed with only grit, guesswork, and enough narcotics to fuel a minor jazz band. It's a thought experiment that starts as a joke and turns uncomfortably real as you tally the score. No digital baby monitor, no pediatrician's hotline, no organic teething toys in calming pastel colors. Just you, your wits, and a medicine cabinet that's also the town's most dangerous apothecary. Modern parenting blogs warn about screen time. In 1902, your biggest concern is whether your baby's screen time will be spent staring at the wallpaper or the spinning patterns inside their own eyelids after a dose of Mrs. Winslow's. Imagine your first sleepless night. The baby's shrieking, your nerves are shot, and there are no noise-cancelling headphones, just the relentless drone of a wind-up clock and a rooster whose internal alarm is set to aggressive. You pace the kitchen in the flickering gaslight, holding a bottle with a label so ornate and vague you can't tell if it's for teething, insomnia, or summoning friendly ghosts. With no internet to consult, your only help is the whisper network of other parents, each with a different theory, dose, and cautionary tale. By day 2, you're getting resourceful. Your routine is pure improvisation, a little syrup for the baby, a swig of restorative tonic for you, and a breakfast of black coffee with a side of invigorating elixir. The baby finally sleeps, mouth agape, one fist clenched in victory, and a suspiciously blissful look. For a moment, you marvel at the silence. Then you worry about the silence. Then you poke the baby to check for breathing because, as every parent throughout history knows, peace and panic are natural siblings. Day 3. You're running low on confidence and supplies. The neighbors are swapping new home remedies. A bread crust for gnawing, a clove rubbed on the gums, a cold potato worn in a sock, for circulation, whatever that means. Meanwhile, you eye the last of the syrup with a mixture of hope and guilt. When the baby stirs, you question your choices for the 12th time that hour. Is this modern science, or just a roll of the dice in the world's most elaborate sleep experiment? By day 4, the lack of regulation is starting to hit home. You find yourself reading the side of the bottle, searching for anything resembling instructions, warnings, or a phone number for customer support. Spoiler, there isn't one. The directions are vague. Use as needed or a spoonful at bedtime. You wonder if your measuring spoon is regulation size, or if it's meant for mixing horse feed. You meet other parents at the general store, looking equally frazzled. Everyone's comparing sleep schedules and miracle cures, each more suspicious than the last. No one trusts the government, but everyone trusts the neighborhood pharmacist, who, judging by his beard, has more experience making mead than mixing medicine. By the end of the week, you're not sure if you've survived by luck, resilience, or the lingering effects of whatever's in that gentle nerve syrup. The baby finally cuts a tooth. You celebrate, exhausted, relieved, and a little wiser, though not necessarily any more confident. Parenting, you realize, is mostly pretending to know what you're doing and hoping the universe takes pity. So, would you have survived? Maybe, maybe not. But the truth is, you do what every parent in every era has done. Improvise, adapt, and rely on the hope that tomorrow brings fewer tears and maybe a little more sleep. And when your modern life feels overwhelming, take heart. At least you're not living in a world where the cure for everything comes with a cork, a wink, and a high probability of side effects. Sometimes survival isn't about having the right answers. It's about making it to sunrise and telling the story later. As you tuck your phone charging, screen watching, allergy-medicated child into bed, you whisper a quiet thanks for the FDA, ingredient lists, and teething rings that don't require a prescription. As you tuck your phone charging, screen watching, allergy-medicated child into bed, you whisper a quiet thanks for the FDA, ingredient lists, and teething rings that don't require a prescription. It's the end of another hectic day. The kitchen glows with LED nightlights, the air hums with the white noise of a climate-controlled home, and your biggest bedtime concern is whether you remembered to switch the baby monitor from audio to video. Your child, drifting off to the soothing glow of a digital aquarium app, clutches a BPA-free silicone teething ring, one that's been sanitized, reviewed by hundreds of other parents online, and approved by more government agencies than your last can of soup. Modern parenting has its own madness. Sure, there's the constant ping of parenting forums, the avalanche of advice about screen time, the parade of allergy alerts, and the deep existential dread that you're not reading enough bedtime stories with positive role models. But in the back of your mind, you know it's all a vast improvement over the old days. Those Wild West years when a parent's main decision was whether to trust the miracle syrup or just let the baby cry and hope for the best. Now, if your child gets a rash, you consult a board-certified pediatrician, not a neighbor with a suspiciously large collection of amulets. If your baby cries, you have a rainbow of options. Frozen teething toys, gentle lullaby playlists, and the occasional stroll with a 5-point harness stroller. When medicine is required, it comes with a list of ingredients longer than your mortgage agreement and warnings so comprehensive they make you nervous about opening the bottle at all. You marvel at the miracles of modern life. A bottle of pain reliever that actually relieves pain and doesn't contain a single drop of laudanum or medicinal mercury. Teething gels that numb the gums without sending anyone to the moon. Allergy medications that come in kid-friendly flavors. Bubblegum, cherry, even unicorn, and, most importantly, don't double as sleep aids for exhausted parents. You can track fevers with a swipe of a forehead thermometer, video call a doctor from the living room, and order diapers to your front door with the press of a button. Your medicine cabinet is less a Pandora's box and more a curated collection of solutions, each one tested, approved, and regulated. There are no mysterious bottles with hand-painted labels or instructions to use as needed for general nerves. You're not worried that your child's cough drop might contain enough cocaine to fuel a jazz quartet. Still, it's tempting to romanticize the past, to imagine simpler days when every cure was homemade and family law was stronger than fact. But nostalgia has a way of editing out the parts where people were just making it up as they went along, rolling the dice, hoping for the best, and sometimes paying the price. Today, at least, you can Google a symptom before resorting to remedies that might double as paint thinner. As you tuck in your child, fed, clean, and mercifully awake, you realize that modern miracles aren't about perfection. They're about having options, about not having to choose between sleep and safety, between peace and plausible deniability. It's about living in an age where the cure is usually less dangerous than the disease. So, tonight, you flip off the light, tiptoe out of the room, and pause for a moment. You whisper a little gratitude to the powers that be, the scientists, the regulators, and all the anonymous parents who blundered through the past so you wouldn't have to, because you know the real miracle is being able to rest easy, knowing that when your child wakes up tomorrow, it'll be with all their teeth and only a little bit of existential dread. It's Saturday and the medicine show is in town. Part vaudeville, part sales pitch, all chaos. The crowd gathers to watch a man in a sequined coat swallow swords and then announce that his greatest trick is curing your baby's teeth, nerves, and possibly your marriage. A bottle of his finest soothing syrup is just a nickel, and every kid in town is about to nap through the next 3 days. You buy 2, just in case the first one actually works. There's nothing quite like a medicine show rolling into a sleepy American town in 1902. The whole event is a blur of music, cheers, and a faint undercurrent of panic from parents who haven't slept since the latest teething epidemic swept through. You follow the rest of the town to the main square, where the showman himself, known only as Professor Sparkle, stands atop a wagon painted in dizzying stripes, flanked by dancing girls, a banjo player, and a man wearing a bear suit for no apparent reason. The performance is a sensory overload, sword-swallowing, fire-eating, a trained chicken that can predict your future, each act more distracting than the last. Every so often, Professor Sparkle launches into his real routine, the sales pitch. Mothers, fathers, are your nights interrupted by the wailing of tiny demons? He shouts, winking at the crowd. Do you yearn for sleep, sanity, and domestic harmony? All can be yours, for the price of a penny candy. He flourishes a bottle of syrup, the label dazzling in the afternoon sun. Dr. Sparkle's soothing elixir, guaranteed to tame the wildest child. There's no FDA, no Better Business Bureau, and certainly no background checks. The professor's credentials are his sequined jacket, a booming voice, and an assistant with the suspiciously healthy glow of someone who's tried all the products. The crowd roars as he cracks a joke, juggles some bottles, and pulls a dove out of his hat, which promptly falls asleep in his hand, testament, he claims, to the gentle power of his formula. You get swept up in the excitement. Parents jostle for a spot in line, clutching their coins and desperate hopes. The air smells of popcorn, sawdust, and the faintest whiff of menthol, probably from the curative vapors he's burning in a brazier by the wagon's steps. The music swells. The banjo player starts singing about miracle medicine and restful nights, and every kid in town eyes the bottles with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for cough syrup and stewed prunes. Once you finally reach the front, Professor Sparkle presses a bottle into your hand. He leans in, lowers his voice, and assures you, 1 teaspoon, and your little angel will sleep till Monday. He throws in a second bottle for free, for the nerves, and you don't bother to ask whose nerves he means. Around you, parents clutch their bottles like treasure, some already uncorking them for an immediate test. Run! The show rolls on. Someone in the crowd starts a rumor that the syrup is made with rare Eastern spices. Another whispers it's just sugar and hope. And a third claims it cured his cousin's night terrors and his neighbor's lumbago. For a moment, you wonder if you're being swindled, but the baby starts fussing, and your resistance melts faster than the ice in your lemonade. By sundown, the wagon is gone, the music has faded, and the town square is littered with empty bottles and parents trading notes on doses and results. The medicine show has left behind stories, a handful of headaches, and, for the lucky ones, 3 solid days of baby-induced silence. You tuck your soothing syrup in the cupboard, quietly grateful for the traveling circus that's turned sleep into a sellable miracle. Maybe next time, the professor will have something for taxes too. You're trading child-rearing secrets with fellow parents on the porch, watching the neighborhood kids chase chickens and chew on fence posts. The consensus? If it moves, dose it. Got a cough? Syrup. Trouble sleeping? Syrup. Bored? Maybe just a little syrup, for fun. It's the multi-tool of the early 20th century. 1 bottle, endless questionable applications. There's a certain camaraderie on a summer evening, with everyone clustered on rickety wooden chairs, trading tales about who's survived the most teething episodes and whose child has learned the dark art of self-escape from swaddling. There's always a collective sigh of relief when someone uncorks a fresh bottle of Dr. Bright's universal elixir and passes it around, each parent sharing their latest hack with a wink and a shrug. Billy wouldn't nap yesterday, says Mrs. Kelly, so I gave him half a spoonful. slept through the postman, the dog fight, and my husband's attempt at the trombone. Mrs. Howard chimes in. Mary was cranky after lunch, so I gave her a dose, and suddenly she was giggling at the laundry line. Best 10 minutes of my week. You nod along, remembering the night you dosed both twins and managed to finish your entire dinner while it was still hot. A luxury that feels suspiciously decadent. The porch becomes an impromptu laboratory, with everyone testing new applications. Johnny's got a stubborn cough? Syrup. Sarah can't sit still for church? Syrup. Timmy's just a little too lively before bedtime? Definitely syrup. The only debate is the dosage, which fluctuates depending on whether tomorrow is a school day, a holiday, or simply a Tuesday that's gone on too long. You're only half joking when you say the syrup is the Swiss Army knife of child rearing. Don't know what's wrong? Start with the syrup. The label claims it soothes the mind, body, and spirit, which is useful, because by 8 p.m., all three are usually in desperate need of soothing. If you're feeling ambitious, you experiment with add-ons, a splash of whiskey for the really tough nights, a dab of clove oil if teething gets, theatrical, or a spoonful of honey for flavor, and plausible deniability if the neighbors start asking questions. It's not just for the kids, either. More than one mother admits to sneaking a spoonful for her nerves, especially after a long day of wrangling children, geese, and the existential dread that comes with realizing your entire home is one spark away from spontaneous combustion. Nothing like a little syrup to take the edge off, someone jokes, and everyone laughs a little too hard. Of course, these hacks come with their own folklore. There's the time the Johnson boy accidentally dosed the family cat, which slept in the flour sack for 2 days and now refuses to come indoors. There's the neighbor who claims syrup helped her husband's snoring, though he's still banned from the bedroom on account of his experimental enthusiasm. If you ask enough people, you'll hear stories about syrup curing hiccups, nightmares, and, once, a lingering case of bad attitude. Nobody talks much about side effects. The pamphlet says, use as directed, but after a month, as directed means as needed, as often as possible, or whenever the spirit moves you. Some children develop a glassy-eyed serenity that's either enlightenment or, more likely, the side effect of pharmaceutical optimism. Others bounce back with renewed energy, leading to a new round of dosing and the time-honored parental prayer. Maybe just one more spoonful. But for all the questionable applications, the hack that matters most is the solidarity it brings. Parents swapping tricks, laughter, and, yes, a little syrup, create a network of shared survival. It's not perfect, it's not safe by modern standards. But in a world where the only alternative is pure, unfiltered chaos, if it moves, dose it feels like the best advice anyone's offering. And as the sun sets and the porch quiets down, you tuck the bottle back on the shelf, satisfied that, for one more day, you've outwitted teething, tantrums, and the relentless march of childhood. One questionable dose at a time. It's 2 a.m. Your baby is teething, your last bottle is empty, and the pharmacy closed at sundown. The only thing louder than your baby's wailing is the voice in your head wondering if whiskey, lard, or prayer will get you through the night. Desperation breeds creativity. You contemplate driving 100 miles in a Model T just to find a replacement, or maybe inventing ibuprofen yourself. There's a particular terror that sets in when you realize you're out of options and out of syrup. The clock ticks with an almost malicious slowness, mocking your hope that dawn will come before your eardrums give out. In the darkness, every sound is amplified. The baby's cries ricochet off the walls, echoing through your bones. You try rocking, shushing, humming, and offering increasingly ridiculous bribes. Please stop screaming. and I'll let you eat the drapes. Nothing works. You search every drawer, every shelf, every pocket of the house, as if a forgotten bottle might appear out of pure parental desperation. The last place you check is the medicine cabinet, where an old bottle of castor oil taunts you from behind a jar of ancient pickles. The label promises digestive harmony and gentle slumber, but you know from bitter experience that castor oil is really just a fancy way of saying, "Tonight will be memorable for all the wrong reasons." You shake it anyway, listening for the telltale glug of a forgotten miracle. Nothing but disappointment and the faint smell of regret. With the pharmacy locked up tight until morning, your mind starts to wander into the realm of questionable folk remedies. Grandma always said a dab of lard on the gums could cure anything, though she also believed in burying a potato in the backyard for luck. You eye the butter dish, then the lard tin, wondering if modern science has gone too far. For a fleeting moment, you even consider rubbing a little whiskey on the baby's gums. After all, it worked for generations, and you could both probably use a drink right now. As you pace the kitchen, you start mentally calculating the distance to the nearest open town, wondering if you could commandeer a neighbor's horse, hitch a ride in a passing wagon, or just run screaming into the night until you hit a pharmacy. Every parent knows the calculus. How much will the baby suffer if you do nothing? And how much will you suffer if you try something new and it backfires spectacularly? The answer is always just enough to make you question your life choices. In the haze of exhaustion, you find yourself inventing home remedies on the spot. Maybe a spoonful of molasses will help, or a bread crust dipped in honey. Or you could try singing backwards. Surely if the baby can recite Edgar Allan Poe after a dose of syrup, you can ward off teething with a lullaby sung in reverse. Every new idea is slightly more absurd. And yet in the sleepless void of 2 a.m., anything feels possible. When all else fails, you resort to the last weapon in the parental arsenal. Bargaining with higher powers. You whisper pleas to the universe, to your ancestors, to anyone who might be listening in the great beyond. Please, just let this child sleep. I promise I'll never complain about laundry again. I'll eat my vegetables. I'll even stop judging Mrs. Abernathy's hat collection. But the crying continues, undeterred by your promises and creative attempts. Eventually, the exhaustion catches up and you settle into the rocking chair, holding your red-faced, wide-eyed baby close. You hum, you sway, and you hold on, because that's what parents do when the syrup runs out and the night feels endless. By sunrise, you're not sure if you survived or simply surrendered. But one thing is certain. The first thing you'll do when the pharmacy opens is buy 2 bottles just in case. And maybe, for good measure, ask the pharmacist about that miracle lard remedy after all. There's a new article in the Ladies' Home Journal, written by a medical expert who assures readers that heroin is far milder than morphine and entirely safe for the young. You read this while stirring the syrup into your baby's milk and begin to suspect the real danger is not the medicine, but the people in charge of it. The problem with science, especially in 1902, is that the loudest voice in the room tends to be wearing a bow tie and carrying a degree from the Institute of Theoretical Chemistry and Useful Guesswork. Back then, medical experts could turn up in the most unexpected places. At the bottom of a cereal box, between ads for corsets, or in the family doctor's cousin's parlor, dispensing advice with a wink and a dash of self-confidence. The Ladies' Home Journal is, of course, the authority on all things domestic, sandwiched between cake recipes and advertisements for soap that removes the sullen disposition from your children. You squint at the medical column, written by Dr. Cornelius Everwell, MD, or maybe that's mostly dramatic. He confidently proclaims that heroin, recently hailed as a miracle sedative, is not only milder than morphine, but perfectly harmless for infants. His evidence? Numerous contented mothers, and a series of very promising nap times. It's hard to argue with science that comes with a full-page illustration of a cherubic, sleeping baby, surrounded by daisies and pure rays of sunlight. The magazine suggests mixing a teaspoon of syrup into warm milk and letting your child drift off to pleasant dreams and gentle restoration. You follow the instructions because the alternatives, sleepless nights, frantic rocking, or trusting your own intuition, sound exhausting. Still, there's a tiny, nagging voice in your head. You remember last week's headline about the latest in healthy diets, featuring bacon, heavy cream, and a cigarette for digestion. This week's expert is next week's cautionary tale, but in the moment, you're too tired to resist the easy comfort of expert reassurance. After all, who are you to question Dr. Everwell, who surely has a bookshelf somewhere with at least one real book? As you stir the syrup into the bottle, you try not to think about the scientific fads that have come and gone. Bleeding, leaching, a brisk walk in the rain to balance the humours, all once considered modern marvels. Your grandmother still keeps a packet of arsenic wafers in her purse, just in case, and your uncle swears that eating coal soot cured his hiccups, along with his sense of adventure. The most dangerous thing about these expert recommendations isn't just their confidence, it's how they turn caution into naivety. Neighbors compare notes. The doctor says it's safe, one mother shrugs, while her child attempts to nap in the bread box. Soon everyone is dosing with impunity, each bottle emptied in the name of progress and good science. The question of long-term effects is waved away with a cheery, "If it's in the magazine, it must be true." The truth, of course, is that the experts are winging it as much as the rest of you, only with fancier stationery and a louder megaphone. Years from now, new experts will shake their heads and wonder how anyone believed such things, conveniently forgetting the time they prescribed magnetic foot baths for arthritis and radium-infused toothpaste for brighter smiles. For now, you trust, you hope, and you follow the advice. Because science, like parenting, is mostly about guessing until someone invents a better guess. And if your baby sleeps peacefully, if a little too peacefully, you try not to let the doubt linger. After all, you did everything right, the expert said so, and as you tuck your child into bed, you silently vow to read every new headline with a grain of salt, a dash of skepticism, and, just in case, a backup plan that doesn't involve the latest marvel of modern chemistry. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into your soft, regulation-compliant bed, maybe with a cup of herbal tea and a baby monitor that doesn't double as a pharmacy, take a moment to send some silent gratitude backward through time. Because the next time your toddler's teething keeps you up at 3 a.m., you can reach for a chilled teething ring, not a bottle of Dr. Goodnight's soothing syrup, now with 50% less heroin. Let's reflect. Parenting in 1900s America was less about gentle parenting and more about wild, desperate improvisation, armed with whatever miracle cure the nearest mustachioed salesman could bottle. They didn't have Google, warning labels, or the FDA. What they had was a will to survive, a high tolerance for chaos, and a collective agreement that if a medicine didn't immediately kill you, it must be good for the kids. There's something darkly inspiring about that resilience. People loved their families, did their best with what they had, and somehow muddled through. Sure, the methods were often, let's say, questionable, but the spirit was pure. Help the baby. Help yourself. Keep everyone alive until morning. And if that meant half the country was sleepwalking on various narcotics, well, it was a simpler time, at least until it wasn't. So, as you drift off tonight, safe in a world with ingredient lists, pediatricians, and laws that require medicine to do more good than harm, whisper a quiet thank you for all the progress, and maybe for your ancestors too, the ones who survived lead paint, patent medicines, and an era when the cure was sometimes wilder than the disease, because history is a testament to stubbornness, accidental innovation, and the ability to laugh about it later. Rest easy, knowing that you live in an age where bedtime is just a little safer, a little saner, and hopefully, a lot less horrifying. Good night.